My name is Juan Carlos Fierro. Each week I explore the most pressing issues of our time, bringing you thought-provoking discussions and eye-opening revelations that will challenge what you thought you knew. Prepare to have your perspective challenged. Juan Carlos Fierro, fearless, factual, and unfiltered. Welcome, Matt. I have today Matthew Hurtt with GOP in Arlington, Virginia. He's a very good friend of me, and I am very impressed by what he's doing in Arlington with the GOP. And welcome.
Hey, Juan Carlos, it's great to be with you and great to have this conversation.
Very good. So tell me a little bit about, you were in a conference this weekend. So tell me a little bit about what were you doing and who were you meeting with?
Every year in Virginia, the Republican Party, the state Republican Party, puts together what they call the Advance, the Donald Huffman Advance. In Virginia, Republicans say we don't retreat, we advance. And this is a gathering of activists and people with party titles, people like me, a unit committee chairman, and donors and others to not only to raise money for the state party, but also to gather together and share tips and information. And so I was down in Norfolk over the weekend and back up in Arlington this week, ready to tackle the local political issues that we're dealing with. But that's my fourth or fifth advance for as long as I've been involved in Virginia, for about 15 years. I've been to only a handful of these, and it's a really energizing event for party members, for conservatives, for grassroots activists, and for donors. And it was just a really great time.
Oh, wonderful. Very good. We elected you for another 2 years, 2-year terms. And like I said before, I am going to repeat many times, you are doing a hell of a job here in Arlington, Virginia, with what you have. You are very, very hardworking. And I think, people realizes that. What are your goals for these next 2 years?
Great question, Juan Carlos. So in Arlington, Virginia, 80% of my neighbors, living and dead, voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. So the Republican Committee has a lot of room for growth, a lot of opportunity, and in particular, an opportunity to speak about local issues. Many issues don't have a partisan label attached to them when it comes to good schools and safe streets and economic opportunity. So from my perspective, the Arlington GOP is committed to not only building out responsible, common sense solutions to the local issues that we face, but also recruiting candidates to go represent those principles, those ideals, and building out the infrastructure to support those candidates. And that means plugging people into volunteer opportunities. It means building out leadership around not only my role as chairman, but the other positions that we have, and to have people become more involved in the civic infrastructure in Arlington. In Arlington, they have something called the Arlington County Civic Federation, and a lot of ideas that get fed into government come up through that infrastructure, which are by and large people who are interested in the issues, they're engaged, and this is the way they play out their involvement in civics and in politics in Arlington. And as the chairman, I want to funnel as many of our members into those community and civic and political opportunities as possible to make an impact and to eventually elect Republicans on the ballot right here in Arlington.
Perfect. And I think that's a great cause. Tell me, why we are going to have to wait until 2027 to get a Republican elected to, either the county board or to the House or the Senate in Richmond?
In Arlington, like I said, we have 80% of voters voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And so the political reality here is that a Republican candidate doesn't get a lot of respect right now. And so in addition to building out, like I said, the infrastructure and that civic and political capability, we have to seize the right opportunity. And in Virginia and in our localities, we have elections every single year. Well, right now in 2024, we have a presidential election. We will have presidential level turnout. That means more people will vote this year in Arlington than tend to vote in off years, so in 2026 or 2022, and even more than those who vote in what we call off years. And those are the odd-numbered years where we elect members of our House of Delegates or State Senate. And even our gubernatorial candidate will be in 2025. And so in Arlington, we use these even-numbered years to build out our capacity and to recruit good candidates and to get a little bit of experience under their belt, so that in years where the Arlington County Democrats aren't as their blue sample ballot doesn't have as much of a stranglehold on voters. They go in, they take a blue sample ballot, they vote for every candidate who is on that ballot. We have an opportunity to build so that in an off year election where the turnout is not quite as high as a presidential year, we have an opportunity to get somebody across the finish line. For example, in 2027, the next off year election beyond the gubernatorial election next year, there will be positions on the ballot like sheriff, like treasurer, those positions which are not expressly partisan at the local level, where a Republican could run and garner enough support from independents and from Democrats to actually get someone elected to office. So that's the goal. We're in this period of, I would say, 3.5 years of building, party building, capability building, infrastructure building, candidate recruitment, and candidate building, to where eventually, in the next opportunity in 2027, to elect someone at that level, at this level, very local level.
What are you looking in reference to a candidate? Why is a good candidate versus a bad candidate? Especially for example, as you know, I run for the Arlington County Board, and I have been told many things, and I just want to hear your opinion. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think a good candidate for local office, and this is irrespective of the locality. So this works in Arlington. It works in rural conservative areas. It works in big cities. But a good candidate, a really good candidate, I would say even an excellent candidate, has some roots in the community. Maybe they had kids who went through the school system, or they have a small business in the community. They're involved in the civic infrastructure. Again, here in Arlington, the Arlington County Civic Federation feeds in from the various neighborhoods and interest groups. Somebody who's involved there. Somebody who maybe is interested in an issue. We have a transportation economist who's a member of our committee, who's actually run for county board before, who digs in on transportation, things like the metro, things like the Arlington Transit, the green buses that people see driving around. All of those are excellent qualifications. So some attachment to the community, some proof that they've been involved in something, and maybe an issue that they can galvanize voters around. A good candidate, if we're going down from excellent to good, a good candidate is someone who, again, comes from the community and is interested and willing to go out and do the work, talk to voters, show up at the debates and panels and candidate forums to raise money. It's expensive even to run for local office. You think about the number of voters. We have about 153,000 voters in Arlington. So communicating with all of them in the mail or via text or on social media or even television and radio is very costly. So somebody who is willing to do that and get out and get their message. And for Arlington Republicans, just having a candidate on the ballot gives voters an alternative. The big thing that we heard in your race, for instance, Juan Carlos, last year, as we were talking with Democrats, they had the blue sample ballot, and they said, I'm going to vote for Democrats for the legislature, but I'm really concerned about these local issues. It doesn't seem like Democrats are addressing them the way that I'd like, and I'm interested in another perspective. And in Arlington, we have a 5-member county board, and there can be no dissent on the county board the way that it works today. Every member is rubber stamped by the Arlington County Democrats. They don't disagree on anything. Everything passes 5-0. And in 2014 in Arlington, Arlington voters elected a non-Democrat to the county board for the first time at that point in about 16 years. And that individual, a guy named John Bystat, was involved in the community, raised money, built a coalition, but he would ask tough questions on the county board, and that gave one of the other Democrats the political courage to to agree with him and to say we should be asking these questions. So we want somebody who will learn about the issues, who's willing to put themselves out there. It's a lot of work to run for office. It's a lot of work even to run for local office, and to have someone invest that amount of time and energy into an effort is very important. So at this point in Arlington, for Republicans, we're looking for any candidate who's willing to put himself or herself out there and do a little bit of the work in an effort to build out a foundation, a strong foundation, so that they can run in 2025 or 2027. Many people who run the first time, they don't win, but they build a little bit of name ID. The more voters hear about them and they understand the issues that they care about, so that they can run successfully in a future election. And so, in 2024 and 2025, and even into 2026, the Arlington Republicans would like to recruit candidates who would be interested in running ultimately in 2027, where they already have established name ID, they have some trust within the community, and they give voters another chance, a second or a third chance to vote for them on the ballot.
So basically, as you know, I got 13,762 votes. The lady that won, Cunningham, got 45,300, I believe. So you strongly believe that there's no way that in a second running we'll be able to make up some of those votes.
So in 2023, we established a baseline. We had a good candidate who ran on local issues. Juan Carlos, you learned very quickly about the issues, what people were interested in: housing, crime, education, those sort of kitchen table issues that everybody cares about, regardless of what their political affiliation is. And we saw what the floor is. So if we're talking, visually, we've got a floor here, and the ceiling is where we need to get to. So knowing that we have 13.5, almost 14,000 votes is a starting point. That then allows us to figure out where we need to go from there. And I know from a committee perspective, what I did in Arlington last year was send out a sample ballot to 14,000 voters, those who we knew were Republican. We knew if they went out and voted, they would vote Republican. And in particular, at the county board level, there was not a partisan affiliation next to the candidate's name. And so, if you're just an average voter in Arlington and you're a knee-jerk Democrat, you're going to vote Democrat if they're at the top of the ticket. You'll vote all the way down if you have to. You're going to take that blue sample ballot and vote for all of those candidates. But once you get down to the county board level, there isn't a partisan affiliation next to the person's name, and that gives us a tremendous opportunity. So I think where we were in 2023 with 13,500, 14,000 votes, another campaign, either this year, the next year, or through 2027, allows a candidate to expand his or her opportunity, and we see where we go, where we can go from there, where we can go up when it comes to votes. And that means targeting more voters. It means expanding our voter outreach. It means obviously raising more money to engage those voters in their mailbox. I get mailings already this cycle, right now in 2024, for Democrat candidates for school board. I received one over the weekend. And so we know that a mailing to a limited universe costs, $3,000 to $4,000. We know a different kind of mailing costs between $7,000 and $10,000, and an expansive mailing, something that would hit enough voters to overcome that 40,000 number, 45,000, is going to cost about $15,000 to $20,000, and that's only communicating with somebody one time. So ultimately, a successful campaign countywide would look like 2 or 3 mailings. What we call a bio piece, something that tells voters about the candidate, an issues piece, something that tells voters where the candidate stands on an issue, and then a contrast piece, something that draws a contrast between the candidate we support and the other candidates on the ballot. So I'm very excited about that opportunity to raise the money and the resources to boost a candidate in that effort.
And I understand you also you raised some money while you were in Norfolk this weekend. correct?
I raised some money last Thursday. We had some longtime members who, because of what you said, Juan Carlos, the energy that I put into this effort, the dedication, the leadership, people who know that we have a tough row to hoe, it's a tough job being a Republican in Arlington, but they see that we're doing productive activity and they believe in that. And so, yes, we had a couple of donors write a $5,000 check late last week. And in 2023, the committee raised $25,000. My goal this year is to raise $30,000. And my goal in 2027 will be to raise $45,000 so that a lot of the joint effort we can plug in through the committee. For instance, if there are 13 positions on the ballot in 2027, rather than 13 different candidates sending out 13 different mailers and costing, $35,000 or $50,000, the committee can do one mailer in support of all of those candidates, significantly cutting back on the cost and maximizing our opportunity to communicate our principles to those candidates and to the voters.
You think that the members of the committee from Arlington, if they're excited about the candidate, it can be whoever is running for Arlington County Board or the school board, will they be able to support that candidate in a way that is meaningful? Meaning, yes, we get donations. I got on some donations, but we need, from the local GOP committee, besides the money that is given to the committee, the candidates also need money, as you may well know. So I am just trying to find out if it's possible and if there are people there that can get excited about the candidate.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think that what it takes is a candidate who asks for money. You don't get the things, particularly in an election, that you don't ask for. So you don't get votes unless you ask for them. You don't get donations unless you ask for them. And I think that a strong candidate spends a significant amount of time on the phone making phone calls. I just picked up some thank you cards because over the weekend in addition to the $5,000 we raised another couple of $100 based on that update because I asked for those contributions. I laid out, we just raised this amount. Here's the goal. Here's what I'm planning to do. Will you invest in those efforts? And many of our members do have the resources to give. And some will give organically, but by and large in campaigns and in politics, you don't get unless you ask for it. And so I think that we've got to have candidates who are willing to put in a little bit of effort to raise the money. And then on the back end, from what the committee can do, in 2023, the committee invested 2/3 of everything we raised through the campaign cycle in direct voter contact to on behalf of the candidate. So we had 3 candidates in Arlington. We had full county coverage 2 times over. So we had 2 state Senate candidates who were running in congruent districts that covered all of Arlington. We had you running for county board. And so everything that the committee did reaching voters, be it sample ballot or the text messages and the other efforts, assisted 2 candidates. And this is why in 2027, if we have 7 or 8 or 9 or 13 candidates, all of our combined efforts will allow those dollars to go even further, knowing that there is, in a place like Arlington, a limited pool of resources for those candidates, and that if there are multiple candidates running that have our support, that maximizing those efforts often comes through the committee. If one candidate is spending on a mailer or a phone call or radio ads, and not other candidates in a system where they're all Republicans, it makes more sense to spend the money through the committee in support of all of those candidates.
Perfect. One of the things that also is of a concern to me is that we have an independent candidate that is most likely going to be running again, and the independent candidate and the Republican candidate are almost the same thing. And we may be taking away votes from each other. So is there a fix to that? Is there how will you handle that?
So in 2023, there were 2 positions on the ballot, and we ran 1 county board candidate. And so the likelihood that one of the candidates was stealing votes from another is low. This year, there's only 1 county board position, and so it's more likely. However, I would argue that the role of the committee is to elect Republicans. And though in 2023, the independent candidate had on accountability, on some fiscal sanity, and on housing, there were similarities. But I would say that the role of the committee is to elect people who will then go on to the county board and express the full scope of Republican principles. That candidate in particular, who's run a number of times in the past, seems to have stalled out in that election with about the same number of votes that you got. And you were a first-time candidate. So give or take about 500 votes, you performed very competitively with that individual. And also in the past, she's run and been affiliated with parties that are far to the left of us, even further to the left than the Democrats. And so I think that from a Republican Party perspective, it is my responsibility to maintain a certain level of fidelity to our principles. And by doing so, we recruit somebody who will run as a Republican. I would love a situation in Arlington where there was multi-party access to elected office. So where Republicans win, where independents win, I think we're better off when there's a diversity of opinion on the bodies who govern us. So the county board, the school board, and others. But from the committee perspective, it's my responsibility to recruit Republican candidates and then get those candidates elected.
Another issue also is the missing middle. There was a lot of talk in 2023 in reference to missing middle. I have a feeling that people are afraid of change. We also talk about higher taxes. I am a fiscal conservative. So it seems to me that I didn't get enough traction to be able to, get enough people involved to be to change this. You understand that there's a lawsuit going on in reference to missing middle. The lawsuit is going on a trial is going to be going on in July. And, that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to elect somebody different from their perspective, from their opinions. What are your thoughts in reference to that?
In Arlington, we first have to consider the strength of the Democratic sample ballot. And that is that the Democratic committee has near 100% coverage at every polling location and through early voting where everyone gets a blue sample ballot. Anybody who walks up to go vote, they are encouraged to take this blue sample ballot. So from a committee perspective, I think that we have to have a greater presence there to get a red sample ballot into the hands of voters so that they know that there are Republicans running. And in addition to that, it is the responsibility of the candidate and the committee to talk about those issues to a broader segment of the population. And so we have candidates who, like, for instance, I mentioned earlier, John Bystat in 2014, who was a known quantity in the civic infrastructure. He'd been involved for 30 years already. He had kids in the school system, so he'd been involved in the PTA. He was involved in fiscal matters at the county board level, and people knew him. And he built out an operation that then went out and communicated those principles to voters. So we need that as well. We need a sustained presence, which is we're able to do that when we raise money and we communicate with voters. We have a message. And so that's what I'm looking to do from a committee perspective is to give our candidates a baseline, a starting point, so that then they can go out and engage voters in a way that shows some mastery or expertise of the issues. If it's particularly if it's an issue that divides the community or where there is not a majority opinion, or if the majority is even opposed to it, we're able to capitalize on that and draw a contrast between the current elected officials. So all of those are opportunities. And as you mentioned, missing middle, I think that a majority of voters who engaged in the election last year were probably opposed or at least skeptical. You mentioned that people are hesitant to change, and I think that's accurate. But the Republican Party, we polled our members, a majority opposed it. I personally have a different view on missing middle than a lot of our committee members did and do. And then we see it play out now in the legal system, which is another avenue for people to engage, to keep the issue alive, and to change policy is by suing. There's a guy in Southern California just last week who took a case all the way to the Supreme Court and beat his local city based on what the Codes Department was charging him for his property. And so we see those victories, and it looks like the missing middle issue, which has popped up in Minneapolis and Washington State and a number of other places. We're seeing people use the legal system to either halt or change or stop that policy.
A couple more things. One of the things that the Arlington County Board has done is to be able to say or to choose ranked choice voting for the primaries that is in June, I believe. And it seems to me that if they're choosing to do that, are they trying to choose a candidate that is different from who's supposed to win?
So there's a lot of opinion on ranked choice voting. Basically, for people who may watch or listen to this, ranked choice voting allows you to rank all of the candidates in your preferred order. In the instance, a situation where we call it maybe instant runoff voting. So what runoff voting is say we have a November election and the rules say that a candidate has to get a clear majority. Well, if nobody gets a clear majority, they drop the lowest vote getter and they have the election all over again. What we did, or what Arlington did in the Democratic primary last year, was have some form of instant runoff where if no candidate got a clear majority, that individual, the least vote getting candidate would drop off, and the votes would then be reapportioned. There's a lot of complexity to ranked choice voting. It disproportionately negatively impacts minority communities. It disproportionately negatively impacts people who vote by mail early because you have a higher percentage of spoiled ballots, and once you've spoiled your ballot, you don't get a revote. And so many people who mailed their ballot in, let's just say we have candidate 1, 2, 3, 4, and you voted for candidate 3 and 4, and both of those candidates were disqualified or they dropped off on the second round. You essentially had no vote in that election. You had 0 votes. And that really violates the trust that people have that we have one man, one vote in this country. And so there's some serious concerns with ranked choice voting. But what it appears to be doing in the Democratic primary process is creating consensus candidates. Generally in a ranked choice or instant runoff, the candidates are nicer to each other. You actually have to vote for the candidates that you like in order. And while as a practical matter, that might support or might help Republicans in the future in Arlington, there are too many unknowns and too many variables that make it difficult for a voter to confidently say, on election day, I don't have a spare piece of paper here to pull up a ballot and say, I'm voting and my vote will count. There's not that confidence to say that my vote counted on election day if we apply ranked choice voting to a general election here in Arlington.
I want to thank you for your time. This has been great. I hope you come back soon. And I hope that we are able to win something before 2027.
Well, I hope so too. And it takes great candidates and people who are willing to invest. And so, my call to action on this show for you, Juan Carlos, is I'm looking for candidates. And if you're interested in running, we'd be happy to chat with you about what it takes to run, from the bare minimum all the way up to making this a full-time, making a campaign a full-time opportunity. So I really just appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Juan Carlos, and appreciate what you're doing here.
Like I said at the beginning, I have tremendous respect for you. I want to help as much as I can, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you for joining me on the podcast this week. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep being fearless, factual, and unfiltered. I am Juan Carlos Fierro, and I will see you in the next episode.